I'll never forget the look on Gerald's face when he realized the truth. His skin went pale, his hands started shaking, and for the first time in 6 years, he had absolutely nothing to say. But let me back up, because what happened in that boardroom wasn't just shocking. It was the kind of karma that makes you believe in justice. This is the story of how a man and his family humiliated the wrong woman and how their arrogance destroyed everything they had. Before we get into how this all unfolded, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this channel after you hear how this ends. Now let's dive in. Her name was Simone, and if you passed her on the street, you probably wouldn't look twice. She had this quiet elegance about her, the kind that doesn't demand attention but somehow commands respect. At least it should have. She was 32 when this story really begins, though the foundation had been building for much longer than that. Simone had been married to Gerald for 6 years. Gerald was a real estate agent, the kind of guy who wore expensive watches and drove a leased luxury car to impress clients. He was handsome, I'll give him that. Charming smile, always knew what to say at parties. When they first met, Simone thought she'd found someone genuine, someone who saw her for who she really was. She came from a working-class background. Her parents had worked multiple jobs to give her opportunities, and she'd built herself up from nothing. She was smart, driven, and incredibly private about her work. Whenever Gerald's family asked what she did, she'd simply say she was a consultant and change the subject. Gerald never pushed for details. Looking back, that should have been her first red flag. Gerald's family was old money. Well, they acted like old money anyway. His mother, Patricia, was one of those women who wore pearls to breakfast and looked down her nose at anyone she deemed beneath her station. Gerald's brother Kenneth wasn't much better. He ran a high-end restaurant and never let anyone forget it. From the very beginning, they made it clear that Simone wasn't good enough for their family. At holiday dinners, Patricia would seat Simone at the far end of the table. During conversations, she'd be talked over, ignored, dismissed. Patricia would make little comments, the kind that sound almost polite on the surface but cut deep. "Oh, Simone, that's such an interesting dress. Very urban." Or, "It's wonderful that Gerald is so accepting. Not every man would be so open-minded." Simone never fought back. She'd smile politely, squeeze Gerald's hand under the table, and wait for the evening to end. She kept hoping he'd defend her, that he'd tell his mother to show respect. But Gerald would just laugh it off, tell her she was being too sensitive, say that's just how his mother was. Deep down, I think part of him agreed with them. Things started falling apart in year 5 of the marriage. Gerald's business was doing well, and he was spending more time at the office. He'd come home late, barely ask about her day, then fall asleep watching television. Simone, meanwhile, was traveling constantly for her consulting work. She'd be gone for days at a time, always professional, always composed. Gerald started to resent her absences. He'd make passive-aggressive comments about how she was never home, how he needed a wife who was actually present. Never mind that his own work kept him out until midnight most nights. The double standard was thick enough to choke on. Then Vanessa entered the picture. She was a new agent at Gerald's firm, blonde, bubbly, always laughing at his jokes. She came from a family Patricia approved of. I'm sure you can see where this is going. The affair started subtly at first. Late nights at the office, weekend meetings that seemed unnecessary, perfume on his collar that wasn't Simone's. Simone knew. Of course she knew. But she stayed quiet, watching her marriage crumble in slow motion. She gave him chances to come clean, asked him directly if something was wrong. He'd lie to her face, tell her she was imagining things, even suggest she was paranoid because of work stress. Kenneth knew about the affair. He encouraged it, actually. "You deserve someone who puts you first," he'd tell Gerald over drinks. "Someone who fits into our world." Patricia was even worse. She started inviting Vanessa to family events while Simone was traveling for work. She'd show Gerald pictures afterward, making sure he saw how well Vanessa got along with everyone. The divorce demand came on a Tuesday evening. Simone had just returned from a business trip to Dubai. She was tired, jet-lagged, looking forward to a quiet night at home. Gerald was waiting in the living room with papers already drawn up. His lawyer had prepared everything. "I want a divorce," he said, not even looking at her. "I've met someone else, someone who actually wants to be a wife." Simone stood there for a long moment, just looking at him. Then she asked very calmly, "Are you absolutely certain this is what you want?" That's when he got cruel. "What are you going to do without me, Simone? You think anyone else is going to want you? You should be grateful I gave you 6 years. My mother was right. I married down, and I've regretted it ever since." Patricia was there too. Can you believe that? She'd come over to support her son, she said. She stood in Simone's home, the home Simone had made warm and welcoming despite everything, and smiled with satisfaction. "You'll land on your feet, dear. Your people always do." Simone signed the papers that night. She didn't ask for anything. Not the house, not alimony, nothing. She packed her personal belongings, mostly clothes and a few photographs, and left before sunrise. Gerald and his family celebrated with champagne. They actually popped champagne. Gerald married Vanessa 3 months later. Patricia threw a party that cost more than most people's yearly salary. Everyone who was anyone in their social circle attended. They all congratulated Gerald on his upgrade, on finally finding someone appropriate. Vanessa wore a designer dress and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, but nobody seemed to notice. For a while, Gerald was riding high. He had the wife his family approved of, the life he'd always wanted. But then the economy shifted. The real estate market took a downturn, and suddenly Gerald's deals weren't closing like they used to. His commissions dropped. His savings started depleting. Vanessa, he was discovering, had expensive tastes. That's when he heard about the opportunity. A massive hotel development project in the city, luxury accommodations, conference facilities, high-end restaurants. The contract would be worth millions. The developer was looking for a real estate partner to handle the commercial leasing and property management. It was exactly what Gerald needed to save his struggling business. There was just one catch. The owner was notoriously private. Everything went through lawyers and intermediaries. Nobody knew much about them, except that they had money, serious money, and connections all over the world. Getting a meeting was nearly impossible. But Gerald had a contact who owed him a favor, and he managed to secure a presentation slot. He spent 2 weeks preparing. This was his shot at redemption, his chance to prove he was more than just a guy with a famous last name. He bought a new suit, rehearsed his pitch 100 times, even had Kenneth help him practice. Patricia assured him it was in the bag. His family name alone would open doors. The meeting was scheduled at a luxury office building downtown, the kind with marble floors and modern art in the lobby. Gerald arrived 15 minutes early, his presentation materials in a leather portfolio. The receptionist was polite but gave nothing away. She simply smiled and said, "Someone will be with you shortly." He was led to the executive floor. The assistant who guided him was professional, walking briskly down a hallway lined with awards and photographs of hotel properties around the world. Gerald recognized some of them, premier properties in London, Paris, Singapore. Whoever this developer was, they weren't playing around. They stopped at a corner office, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the kind of view that costs more per month than most people's mortgages. The assistant knocked once, then opened the door. "Ms. Blackwell will see you now," she said. Gerald walked in, his pitch ready, his confidence building. Then he looked up at the woman sitting behind the massive desk, and his entire world stopped. It was Simone. I wish I could have seen his face in that moment. The color drained from his skin like someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened, but no words came out. The leather portfolio slipped from his hands and hit the floor with a thud that echoed in the silence. Simone looked up from the documents she was reviewing. She was wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than Gerald's car payment. Her hair was styled differently, more sophisticated. Diamond earrings caught the light. But her expression was the same calm, composed look she'd always had. "Please sit down, Gerald," she said, her voice steady and professional. He couldn't move. He literally couldn't make his legs work. So Simone stood up, walked around her desk, and gestured to the chair across from her. "I know this is surprising, but we do have business to discuss. Please." Gerald finally managed to stumble to the chair and collapse into it. His brain was clearly trying to process what he was seeing, but failing completely. You're... I'm the CEO of Blackwell Hospitality Group, Simone said, settling back into her own chair. I own and operate 47 luxury hotels across 3 continents. We're currently valued at approximately $2.3 billion, though that number fluctuates with the market. The silence that followed was deafening. Gerald's mouth kept opening and closing like a fish out of water. Finally, he managed to whisper, "How?" Simone leaned back in her chair, and for the first time, I imagine she let herself feel the satisfaction of this moment. I started with a small inn 12 years ago. I was 20 years old. I bought it with money I'd saved from working 3 jobs through college. I renovated it myself, learned the hospitality business from the ground up. She paused, letting that sink in. While we were married, I was building this company. Those consulting trips you resented? I was acquiring properties, negotiating deals, establishing partnerships with international investors. I worked nights, weekends, every spare moment. You never asked for details, and I didn't volunteer them. Gerald was shaking his head, like he could deny reality if he just refused to believe it. But why didn't you tell me? And here's where Simone's voice got quiet, but somehow even more powerful. Because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I had. I grew up with nothing, Gerald. I built this empire from scratch, and I've seen what money does to people. It changes them. I kept my business under my maiden name because I wanted to know that the man I married loved Simone. Just Simone. She looked at him directly now, and there was sadness in her eyes. I thought you were that person. I thought you saw me. But your family was right about one thing. We weren't suited for each other. The difference is you married up, not down. You just never knew it. Gerald tried to recover, to remember why he was there. He stammered through his presentation, but it was pathetic. His hands shook so badly he could barely hold his notes. His voice cracked. Everything he'd prepared sounded hollow and inadequate now. Simone listened politely, the same way she'd listened to Patricia's insults all those years. When he finished, she nodded thoughtfully. Thank you for your time, Gerald. My team will review your proposal and get back to you. But they both knew the answer was no. His proposal wasn't good enough, but more than that, she had no reason to give him anything. He'd taken everything from her dignity, her trust, 6 years of her life, and thrown it away like garbage. Gerald stood up, but he couldn't leave. Not yet. Simone, I made a mistake. I see that now. Maybe we could... Could what? She interrupted. And now there was steel in her voice. Start over? Pretend the last year didn't happen? Pretend you didn't mock me, belittle me, let your family treat me like I was worthless? She stood up, and suddenly she seemed 10 feet tall. I gave you 6 years of genuine love, Gerald. I cooked your favorite meals. I supported your career. I showed up to every one of your family's awful dinners and smiled through their cruelty because I loved you. And what did you give me? Contempt, betrayal. And on our last night together, you told me I should be grateful you married me at all. Gerald's eyes were wet now. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm sure you are, Simone said. She walked to her office door and opened it. Security will show you out. And Gerald, don't contact me again. We have nothing left to say to each other. 2 security guards appeared. Gerald looked at them, then back at Simone, then walked out with what little dignity he had left. Which wasn't much. News travels fast in business circles. Within a week, everyone knew. Gerald, the guy who'd divorced his wife to marry someone more suitable, had actually divorced a billionaire. The joke started immediately. He became a punchline at cocktail parties. Other real estate agents would snicker when he walked into networking events. Vanessa left him within a month. She'd married him for the lifestyle she thought he could provide, and when she realized he was actually broke and getting broker, she was gone. She didn't even bother with a long explanation, just packed her bags and moved in with a banker she'd met at one of Patricia's parties. Gerald's business completely collapsed. Nobody wanted to work with him. Clients disappeared. His reputation was destroyed. He had to sell the house, the car, everything. He ended up in a small apartment on the wrong side of town, working for a property management company, making a fraction of what he used to earn. But the real karma came for his family. Patricia tried to contact Simone, of course. She sent flowers, letters, even showed up at Simone's office building once. Her message was always the same. It had all been a misunderstanding. She'd always liked Simone, really. Perhaps they could have lunch. Simone's assistant turned her away every time. The flowers went straight to the trash. The letters went unopened. There would be no reconciliation, no second chances. Kenneth needed it the most. His restaurant was failing, hemorrhaging money every month. He'd made some bad investments, and now he needed capital urgently. He reached out to Simone through a mutual contact, practically begging for a meeting. She could invest, become a silent partner. He'd give her anything she wanted. Her response, delivered through her lawyer, was simple. Ms. Blackwell doesn't invest in failing businesses or people who lack integrity. The restaurant closed 6 months later. Kenneth had to declare bankruptcy. Patricia's social circle, the same people who'd attended Gerald's wedding to Vanessa and congratulated him on his upgrade, quietly distanced themselves. Nobody wanted to be associated with the family that had been stupid enough to throw away a connection to Simone Blackwell. A year later, Simone attended a charity gala. She donated $5 million to establish scholarships for working-class students pursuing careers in business and hospitality. The news covered it. Her photo appeared in business magazines. She gave an interview about her journey from poverty to success, about building something from nothing. Gerald saw that interview. He was alone in his cramped apartment, eating takeout on a second-hand couch, when her face appeared on his television screen. She looked radiant, happy, free. The interviewer asked her about success, about what it meant to her. Simone smiled, a real smile, the kind Gerald hadn't seen in years. "Success isn't about the money," she said. "It's about knowing your worth and never letting anyone convince you otherwise. I knew who I was when I had nothing. I knew who I was when people looked down on me. That knowledge didn't change when my bank account did." "Do you have any regrets?" the interviewer asked. Simone thought about it for a moment. "I regret giving my trust to people who didn't value it, but I don't regret the experience. It taught me that real character shows up when people think you have nothing to offer them. The people who loved me when they thought I was nobody, those are the people still in my life today." Gerald turned off the television. He sat in the dark, thinking about everything he'd lost. Not the money. He'd never had access to that anyway. But the woman, the real woman, someone who'd loved him genuinely, completely, without conditions. Someone who'd built an empire and never needed to brag about it. Someone with more class and dignity than anyone in his entire family. She'd been extraordinary the whole time. He just hadn't bothered to look. Simone never needed to prove her worth. She knew it all along. That quiet dignity, that refusal to engage with people who tried to diminish her, that wasn't weakness. That was strength. Real strength. Gerald and his family learned the hardest way possible that you can't judge a person's value by their willingness to prove themselves to you. The most valuable people often don't need to prove anything. They know who they are. If this story taught you something about respect, about really seeing the people in your life, drop a comment below. Tell me your thoughts. And if you want more stories about karma, about justice, about what happens when people realize they've made a terrible mistake, subscribe and hit that bell icon. Because trust me, there are more stories coming and you won't want to miss a single one. Remember, the next person you underestimate might just be the one who holds your entire future in their hands. Treat people with dignity. Treat them with respect. Not because of what they can do for you, but because that's what good people do. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.